Welcome, I'm Audrey. I'm an instructional design partner in teaching and learning with technology. Heidi Collins, Associate Director of TLT, will be monitoring the chat. She'll also be posting a resource guide link in the chat. So if you'd like, you can copy and paste that link into your browser and make a copy of it. There's instructions on the last page to make a copy. That way you can have access to it after the webinar is complete. The focus of our webinar today is on alternative assessments for online classes. So we're going to discuss ways to improve your tests as you move them online and alternatives to traditional testing that work for online classes. So this will be especially helpful if you are moving from face-to-face to online classes, but also helpful even if you've already been teaching online. I hope it will inspire some new ideas about how to assess your students. The focus of this webinar is 8 alternatives to traditional testing. So we're going to cover these 8 alternatives to traditional testing. So we'll start with how to improve online tests, and then we'll discuss some alternatives such as presentations, online discussions, short essay questions, research papers, infographics, case study responses, and then using surveys to check for understanding. So we'll talk about each one in turn. So we're starting with improving your online test. So if you are wondering how to take paper tests to an online test format, some concerns you might have are students using books, students using notes, using their friends to take their test, taking it in groups. So first things first, it's important to remember that no online assessment can prevent all forms of cheating, but there are ways to more effectively assess student learning by accounting for the difference between the online testing environment and the face-to-face environment. So the first suggestion is to use pools of questions that Canvas can pull from so that students do not all answer the same questions. You can also randomize answer choices. If you choose to randomize answer choices, make sure that you do not have static answer choices such as both A and C or all of the above, because those will get mixed around and won't be accurate for students. The second suggestion is to set time limits for students taking your tests and quizzes. And I want to encourage you to think carefully about a reasonable amount of time. So you want, not too much time so that students have too much leeway, but also not too short that it will make students feel anxious about completing the exam. And then most importantly, the last suggestion is to write questions in a way that allows students to refer to class notes and interpret the information rather than memorizing it. And that's what we'll talk about more on this next slide. So I've included a table here to help you think more about asking meaningful questions that align with your course objectives. This table uses Bloom's taxonomy to help guide you to questions based on what you want students to know or do based on the student learning outcomes you've already set. So for example, if you look at your learning objectives and decide that they're really asking students to apply knowledge or understanding, then you can look at the third row, last column. You're saying, I want students to apply knowledge to a particular task or problem. And then this table gives you some question stems to help kind of inspire some quiz and exam questions that will allow you to assess students' knowledge and apply that knowledge. This table is also on the resource doc, so you can have access to it. So next, I'd like to show you all how to randomize quiz questions by creating a question bank in Canvas. So over here in our Canvas course, I'm going to come to quizzes. So I've already created this final exam. So I'm going to click on it and then edit it up here in the right. And I'll just take a moment here to check my quiz details. This is where you can choose to shuffle answers and give time limits. And then you can set your due date down here. But what I really want to go over is how to create a question group. So you're going to come over here to this second column where it says questions and click new question group. So we're going to call this group Final Exam Questions, and we want to decide how many questions students need to take for their exam. So we want Canvas to randomly pick 10 questions, and each question will be worth 10 points each. For example, you can set this to anything that you like. If the exam is 10 questions, you'll type that pick 10 and then create group. And then from here, you can use this little plus sign to add individual questions. Friendly reminder to name your question here so that you can refer back to it later. And then you can select your question type over here. You would type your question. And then when you're ready, update question down here. So if you are asking Canvas to randomly choose 10 questions for students to take and you don't want them all to have the same questions, that means that you should enter more than 10 individual questions so that Canvas can randomly pull from a larger question bank to get those 10 questions that each student will answer. Once you update your question, if you need to edit the question, you can come over here to this pencil icon and you can edit. Say if you changed your mind and you want it to do 12 questions worth 8 points each or whatever you decide, and then save here. So make sure that you have all of your questions here in the question group. You can also edit your questions from here. If you assigned presentations in your face-to-face class, it is possible to adapt this assessment type and this method for assessing student knowledge for online classes. You can do presentations synchronously with web conferencing like Blackboard Collaborate and Google Meets, or you can ask students to pre-record their presentations using Panopto. You should consider using a rubric to grade presentations, both to make it easier for yourself to grade and also so that students have clear expectations. So next I'd like to demonstrate how to use a rubric in SpeedGrader. This again makes it easy to grade and easy for students to understand what kind of feedback you're giving them. So I'm going to come over here in my Canvas course to grades, which is over here on the left. And you can see I've already have an assignment here with some student submissions. So this little notepad piece of paper, little icon here, that means that students have submissions that need to be graded. So if you come over here to the first one, and there are a couple ways to get into SpeedGrader. This is just one way and I'll show you another way later on. Again, I clicked on it, click this arrow over here on the right, and then click SpeedGrader. So here I can see a student submission, and I'm going to click View Rubric. So you can use this gray bar here to make the rubric bigger. You can just drag it out. And you can see I've already entered this rubric in here. And as I'm grading, I can go through and choose the number of points each student submission. And then when you're finished, press Save. You have the total points down here. So you'll want to enter it up here. And don't forget to click Submit. So you'll know everything went through when you see this check mark up here next to the student's name, letting you know that you've graded that and that it's been submitted. So moving on to online discussions. Online discussions and asking students to do it as a form of assessment can create a sense of engagement for students because they are building community and they're moderating their own conversations. You can choose to initiate discussions with your own set of questions, and you can do discussion assessments with a few different tools in Canvas. You can use the discussion board, you can use Canvas blog or a wiki, and TLT has templates for doing blogs and wikis in Canvas. So if you need help accessing or using those templates, feel free to contact us or an instructional design partner if you'd like to use those templates. So next, I'd like to demonstrate adding a rubric to a discussion board. So I'm going to come over here and use these 3 stacked lines here to find discussions. And here's a discussion I've already created called Final Reflection Discussion. And then over here in the right, I'm going to use these 3 dots to add a rubric. And from here you can create your rubric. If you need more rows, you can add a criterion, and you'll have to give it a short description and a long description. You can also add more columns by using the plus sign here. Canvas will try to kind of calculate for you, so if you have 5 and 0, it'll find kind of the best point in between, but you can make that anything that you want. You can choose to do 2.5. You can also edit the criterion here. You can edit the number of points and the title and the description, and you'll see that as soon as you enter the highest number of points in this column to the left, it'll update the points over here, and then the total points will update down here. So when you're ready, and of course give it a title up here so that you can find it later. If you have saved rubrics, you can use this little magnifying glass here to find rubrics that you've already created. And then when you're ready, press Create Rubric. This is the rubric that will be attached to to this assignment in the gradebook. And I find it easier to, if I have a rubric that's already typed in a Word document or somewhere else, it's easier for me to copy and paste it into the rubric here rather than trying to draft the entire thing here from scratch. All right, moving on to our next one, short essay questions. You can use short answer questions, short essay questions to ask students to apply and interpret course information. This method encourages students to develop good study habits like making outlines and summaries. So if they know that they will be able to use their notes, then they can make really good notes for themselves in order to answer these short essay questions. Use the assignment tool or the quiz tool in Canvas to ask students to do short essay assessments, and review the Bloom's taxonomy chart that we talked about earlier for more ideas about question stems. Research papers encourage critical thinking by students, asking them to engage with a scholarly conversation through doing their own research and making their own argument. So it's really a way to ask them to create an argument based on what they understand. You can use peer reviewing in Canvas to encourage collaboration, and you can use Canvas's Turnitin integrated tool. So that's our next demonstration here. So I'm going to come over here to assignments just to show you how I've set up this Turnitin integration, and come over here to academic argument essay. I'm going to come here to edit, and you can see under plagiarism review, I've selected Turnitin. So this is the other way to access SpeedGrader over here in the assignment. It's just over here in the right column. So this will take you directly to the assignment. So the paper will pull up here. And in addition to this information over here that you had before, now you have this similarity report. So we can see that the similarity score is 91%, which is not good. That's cause for concern. If you click on that 91%, then you'll be taken to the Turnitin report. And you can see more details if you click on these numbers here. All of the highlighted sections are sections that are seen somewhere else that it found on the internet. If you click on these numbers here, you can see where this information was found. So you can see this was copied from an internet source called 123helpme.com, and this one was submitted to another university, so it probably came from a paper repository or something like that. If you come over here, you can see some more details about the similarity report. And you can also download the similarity report if you'd like to include it in the students' feedback. Just a note, when you first open Turnitin, it'll ask you to agree to their terms. You can go ahead and submit agree to the terms. Our next alternative assessment are infographics. So infographics can teach students technology skills, while they also encourage students to distill complex ideas and concepts. So you can use PowerPoint SmartArt to create infographics. There's an article in the resource doc that's simple how-to for creating infographics in PowerPoint. You can ask students to submit infographics in a discussion board or in a wiki page. Again, you can use the TLT templates to help you with that, and they can see each other's work. Infographics are a great way to they have to understand things enough to be able to distill complex ideas into this smaller component. When you allow students to share them with each other, then they can use each other's to learn new information. I learn new information from infographics all the time. Next one is case study responses. So case study responses encourage students to problem solve by applying course concepts to real world situations. So it's a really great way to apply knowledge to solve a problem. If you are using case study responses, this is a great way. This is a great one for scaffolding. You can pair with background reading so that they can see a model of how this kind of problem solving is done. And you can ask students to do case study responses both individually or in teams and submit it as an assignment in Canvas. Next, and our last tip here, our last alternative assessment here is using surveys to check for understanding. So an important tip for engaging with students, especially moving online in the way that we did very quickly, is to build in opportunities for feedback. So you want to communicate with students often, and this is a great way to solicit feedback from students, both about how they're understanding course information, whether they have questions about their final exam or any other projects that they're working on, and just kind of check in and see how they're doing. You can use surveys that are not graded just to get feedback from students, but you could also use graded surveys to give them some extra points. It could be worth extra credit or worth just a few points to kind of help boost their grade, since there's no right or wrong for this type of feedback. Graded surveys, if you set it up as a graded survey, it'll appear in the syllabus, in the gradebook, in the calendar, and in their to-do list. So it's a way to, I think, kind of incentivize them to do it if they see it in these multiple places. Okay, so coming back into our Canvas course here, the last demonstration that I want to show you is setting up an ungraded survey. So if we come over here to quizzes, we're going to create a quiz by clicking this plus sign up here in the right. And we're going to call this final exam survey. You could call it feedback, something like that. Here in the rich content editor is where you will type in any information that they may need to know. And then under quiz type, you'll select either a graded survey if you want it to be worth points. And this means that when you submit questions, there'll be no right or wrong question. Or it can be an ungraded survey worth no points. And you still have all of your quiz options here, and you can still set a due date here. When you're ready, click Save, or you can click Save and Publish, but don't forget to publish it. Oh, and I wanted to remind you also, don't forget to use this little tab over here to add your questions. And you can also add a question group the same way we did before. But if you're adding individual questions that all students answer the same questions, then you would use the question here. All right, so lastly, I want to talk about some best practices for online assessment. So as we are finishing up this semester, students might have bigger projects to work on. Students might be moving online, right? And they have to complete things online and may not have as many opportunities to discuss these final projects, or you might not have the same kind of opportunities to check in with them. So we've compiled this list of tips to kind of help you, things to think about as you are grading students and assessing students in their completion of your learning outcomes. So the first thing is to break larger projects down into smaller sessions. So if they have a bigger research project that's due, maybe the first step would be asking them to submit a bibliography and then submit an introduction or a thesis statement and then kind of build from there. And you can give feedback throughout that process so that students know that they're on the right track or don't get all the way to the end and realize that they did it incorrectly or something. You can also scaffold assignments that build on each other. So if they're learning one skill, that skill can build on another skill, which can help them finally apply or do their case study response at the end of the semester. It also may be helpful to provide examples. So I think that this would be particularly helpful when using like an infographic. Provide students with examples of what infographics look like so they know what it is expected. Provide detailed rubrics. Some of the rubrics we saw, I would say, need to be even more detailed so that students know exactly what you're looking for. So you really use those long descriptions in the rubric function to make sure that students have all of the information about what you're looking for and what's expected of them. Provide feedback for the entire class when it's appropriate. So if you have students, for example, everybody submitted a thesis statement as one component of their final research project, and you notice that all of the thesis statements are lacking in some area, then you can use announcements or an email to speak to all students at once about some patterns that you see that might need improvements. Use Q&A discussion boards. So you saw over here in our example course here, I've added a Q&A discussion. It's open all the time, so students can ask questions throughout the semester. And that way, if students have a question and they're all asking the same question. You don't have to answer them individually, but also some students might see questions here that they didn't even think to ask but are actually really helpful to them. So if you can have a Q&A discussion throughout that students can ask what they need at any time and then see each other's responses, that can be really helpful. And then lastly, consider a variety of assessments. So if you are kind of pairing different kinds of assessments, one is more writing based, maybe one is more speaking based, maybe one is solving a problem or doing multiple choice questions, then students kind of have multiple opportunities to understand the information and to make sure that they're meeting the course expectations. But they can also have many opportunities to kind of find those places where they really shine. This is something that I've done with my students for some projects that they're doing. I've given them the option to submit it either as a video or as a written. So students who are really comfortable speaking really like to have a video to submit their response. And some students who are more comfortable writing are able to write their responses so they can really find what works best for them. And again, I want to remind you to go back to your student learning outcomes. So think about, what do you want students to really know, and pare back as you need to. What is going to be that project or that series of assignments that are building on each other that's really going to help you accomplish the student learning outcomes. We have resources on the tw.edu/tlt that might be helpful.